Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. US Democratic candidate Joe Biden says he is going to win the presidency with more than 300 electoral votes. Speaking in Delaware, Biden says he has gained over 74 million votes, more than any presidential ticket has ever got in America. The Democratic candidate has taken the lead in Pennsylvania with 99% of the votes counted. Biden is also leading in Nevada and Arizona, while a recount will be held in Georgia. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has warned Biden against declaring the victory. As Democratic candidate Joe Biden inches closer to the victory in the U.S. presidential election, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has called on the next U.S. administration to return to the nuclear deal commitments. In a televised speech, Rouhani said the Iranian people have been facing economic terrorism for the past 3 years. In Afghanistan, a former television presenter and 2 other civilians have been killed in a car bomb explosion in Kabul. Yamas Yavash died when a bomb attached to his vehicle exploded near his residence in the Afghan capital. No group has immediately claimed the responsibility for the attack. France has registered over 60,000 daily COVID-19 cases, with a tally crossing 1.6 million. In India, 577 people have died and over 50,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Pakistan registered over 1,500 new cases and 20 fatalities overnight as the death toll rises to 6,943. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1.24 million lives and infected over 49.2 million people. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. U.S. Democratic presidential hopeful Joe Biden says he is certain to win the race for the White House as his lead over President Trump widens. With the count in its final stages, Biden inches closer to the 270 electoral votes mark needed to lead the country. This report has more.
Democrat presidential candidate Joe Biden has once again urged Americans to remain patient and calm as ballot counting continues in a handful of states that hold the key to the White House. Speaking to supporters in Delaware, Biden said that the numbers told a clear and convincing story, and he is going to win the presidency. Biden gained lead over Trump in the battleground states of Pennsylvania and Georgia, as he already enjoyed a lead in Arizona and Nevada. Vote counts so far show Biden leading Trump by 4.1 million votes nationwide out of a record 147 million. As Biden inched closer to the win, hundreds of Democrats gathered in cities across the United States, dancing in celebration.
Just look at what has happened since yesterday. 24 hours. We were behind in Georgia. Now we're ahead, and we're going to win that state. 24 hours ago, we were behind in Pennsylvania, and we are going to win Pennsylvania. And now we're ahead, but we're winning in Arizona, we're winning in Nevada, and in fact, our lead just doubled in Nevada. We're on track to over 300 electoral college votes.
Meanwhile, in a tweet, Republican President Donald Trump warned that Biden should not wrongfully claim the presidency. Trump vows to press unfounded claims of fraud as Republicans sought to raise $60 million to fund lawsuits challenging the results. Dozens of Donald Trump supporters demonstrated outside the election centers in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, calling for count of legal votes.
I'm here because I don't believe Georgia is a blue state. I believe we are a red state. I think there's more afoot here than just normal legal ballots. So I find my freedom and my freedom of choice important to me.
Well, I'm upset about these votes. I know there's a bunch of voter fraud going on, and I think people need to step up, and I think it needs to be a fair election.
Some in Trump's camp define the legal efforts as disorganized. The close election has underscored the nation's deep political divides, and upon winning, Biden will have to govern a deeply polarized Washington.
As Democratic candidate Joe Biden inches closer to victory in the U.S. presidential election, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has called on the next U.S. administration to return to the nuclear deal commitments. In a televised speech, Rouhani said the Iranian people have been facing economic terrorism for the past 3 years. The president said he hopes those who sanctioned Tehran will realize that their methods have been wrong. In May 2018, President Donald Trump reneged on the nuclear deal signed between Iran and the world powers in 2015. But Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has promised to return to the deal and ease pressure on Iran. In Afghanistan, a former television presenter and 2 other civilians have been killed in a car bomb explosion in Kabul. Yamas Yawash died when a bomb attached to his vehicle exploded near his residence in the Afghan capital. Earlier, the Afghan government said the Taliban's Helmand governor was injured in an airstrike. The defense ministry said the head of the Taliban's intelligence for Nadir Ali district and 9 fighters were also killed. Taliban have not yet commented on either of the 2 attacks. The spike in violence comes as the Taliban and the Afghan government continue deliberations on the framework of the peace talks in Doha. Azerbaijan says its forces have liberated 16 more villages in the Upper Karabakh region from Armenia's occupation. Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said the villages were liberated in Fuzuli, Jibrail, Zengilan, Gubadli, Khojale and Khojavand. President Ilham Aliyev announced the liberation of these areas on Twitter. Earlier, the Azeri Defense Ministry said the Armenian forces once again targeted civilian areas. In a statement, the ministry said its military dealt heavy damage to Armenian troops in response. The ministry stated Armenia's 178th Reconnaissance Battalion have lost half of its military personnel. It added the military personnel of Armenia's Special Forces unit were also surrounded and destroyed. Nearly 1,200 troops have been killed since the clashes broke out in September. In Iraq, the police have killed a protester in the southern city of Basra. Medics say around 40 others were wounded as security forces opened fire during clashes with hundreds of protesters. Local officials say protesters took to the streets demanding jobs and basic services. The clashes broke out after some of the protesters tried to set up tents in a public square. Iraq's Interior Ministry has confirmed the death of the 29-year-old man identified as an unemployed Iraqi, Umar al-Taibi. In a statement, the ministry said it is investigating the incident as the security forces are not allowed to use weapons against the demonstrators. More than 500 people have been killed since the anti-government protest movement began in October 2019. HEZBOLLAH has condemned the U.S. sanctions on the president of the Free Patriotic Movement Party in Lebanon. In a statement, HEZBOLLAH said the sanctions are political and undisguised interference in the internal affairs of Lebanon. It said the U.S. has no right to preach on fighting terrorism as it sponsors terrorism, corruption and dictatorships across the globe. This came after U.S. Treasury Department blacklisted son-in-law of Lebanon's President Michel Aoun, Gibran Bassil. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said systemic corruption in Lebanon's political system was exemplified by Bassil. Responding, Bassil said he doesn't fear the curbs and will never turn against the Lebanese people. The second phase of Egypt's general elections has started across 13 governorates. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has also cast his vote in Heliopolis city. Around 31 million Egyptians are eligible to cast their ballots over the 2 days. Some 2,000 candidates are competing for 70 individual seats, while 284 candidates are competing under the list system in 2 districts. Egypt's National Election Authority will announce the results of this phase on the 15th of November. Earlier, a pro-government party won a sweeping majority of votes in the first phase. Hong Kong's chief executive says whoever wins the US presidential election should end interference in China's internal affairs. Addressing media in Beijing, Carrie Lam expressed hope the US approach to Hong Kong will improve. Lam said every country and the government should respect the jurisdiction of another country.
Whatever administration in the United States of the day, I would like to make this appeal that every country, every government should respect the jurisdiction of another country and another territory. For the past year or so, the American administration and officials have been repeatedly interfering with internal affairs of the People's Republic of China and the internal affairs of Hong Kong. That is totally unreasonable and could not be justified in international relationships.
Ethiopia says its air force has bombed arms depots and destroyed military hardware in the opposition-held northern Tigray region. In a televised address, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the strikes hit important sites of the rivals in the regional capital of Mekelle. Abiy said he will disarm the fugitives belonging to Tigray People's Liberation Front with justice. He said the operations seek to safeguard the rights of Ethiopians to lead a peaceful life and to restore the rule of law. PM's office has accused Tigray People's Liberation Front of using the civilian population as human shields in the operation. Earlier, Ethiopia announced launching the military operations against Tigray following a deadly attack on an army base. In Nigeria, protests against police brutality have intensified as security forces fired tear gas to disperse the crowds. Local media said police also used gunshots on the protesters in the capital Abuja. Led by former presidential candidate Omele Sowore, the demonstrators gathered outside the National Assembly complex. Mass protests began earlier this month against the killings and mistreatment by the police's special anti-robbery squad. Despite disbanding the police unit, the demonstrations have continued in Lagos and other parts of the country. Last month, President Muhammadu Buhari called on the youth to end the demonstrations across the country. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says he wants to have better ties with Washington after the US presidential election. The president expressed concern over the uncertainty of the election results in the US. Maduro said Americans no longer want imperialist wars and threats.
We want to have the best relations of dialogue and cooperation with the United States, no matter who wins. Someday they will understand, someday they will. It's just a matter of time. A new consciousness is rising in humanity. A new consciousness is rising in the United States of America, in its youth, in its people. They no longer want imperialist wars. They no longer want threats and looting.
The International Civil Aviation Organization has asked Iran to speed up the probe into the downing of the Ukrainian airliner in January. The UN agency said it has had several exchanges with the Iranian authorities to investigate the incident in accordance with its provisions. Responding, Iran's Air Chairman Farhad Parvez said Tehran has responsibly reported to the organization on the progress. He said Iran is obeying international rules and will send the final draft of the report to the participating nations soon. The Ukraine Airlines flight was shot down by an Iranian ground-to-air missile, killing 176 people. The UN has called for holding credible elections in Myanmar to help advance human rights and democratic reforms. Secretary General Antonio Guterres' spokesperson hoped they will help pave the way for the return of refugees. Stefan Dujarric urged a ceasefire across the country to allow everyone to focus on combating the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the spokesman said all the parties to the armed conflict must respect their obligations under international law. He said Guterres will follow the general elections in Myanmar on 8th of November. Meanwhile, civil society groups say dozens of networks on Facebook are spreading falsehoods they fear could lead to strife. They are also worried it may undermine the upcoming polls in the country. France has registered a record over 60,000 daily COVID-19 cases, with the tally crossing 1.6 million. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1.424 million lives and infected over 49.2 million people. More about the pandemic in this report.
The coronavirus continues thrashing relentlessly as the world reports hundreds of thousands of daily cases. The European continent has emerged to be the epicenter of the virus in the second wave. The region now accounts for more than 12 million cases and over 300,000 deaths. The United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, Spain, Greece, Norway, Denmark, and many others have shut down daily lives considerably to cope with the virus's spread. In France, the virus has exhausted the healthcare system as authorities say the younger population is equally being attacked by the virus.
At the beginning of the second wave, it was more vulnerable people and more elderly people coming to the hospital. But for several weeks now, that's no longer the case. The average age of patients in the unit has lowered. We have people aged 40 or 30 who even had to be intubated and ventilated.
Over in Asia, the outbreak in India continues to overwhelm the authorities. 577 people have died in the country and over 50,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned a unique mutation of the virus in Minsk has the potential of a global spill of a new strain.
We are working with our regional offices in Europe, in Wipro, and in the Western Pacific and in the Americas, where there are mink farms, because there are many mink farms all over the globe, and looking at the biosecurity on the mink farms, looking at the surveillance that's happening in these mink farms, and to support countries in taking the right steps to prevent the virus to continue to circulate in minks and to prevent spillover events from happening.
In the United States, infection tally has exceeded 9.7 million, with over 236,000 deaths. The White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has also tested positive for the virus. In Latin America, the virus continues to remain the most fatal in Brazil. The country has reported nearly 300 deaths and over 18,000 cases in the past 24 hours.
Pakistan has reported 20 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The health ministry said the country's death toll has risen to nearly 7,000. The ministry said 1,502 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. It added that the number of active cases in the country is nearly 17,000. More than 317,000 patients have recovered so far across the country. It said 890 patients remain critical. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The European Union has imposed sanctions on 8 ministers newly appointed by Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. In a statement, the bloc accused the officials of violent repressions of Syria's civilian population. It said the curbs include ban on traveling, freezing of assets, ban on the import of oil and export of the technological equipment. The bloc added the total number of sanctioned persons has risen to 288. The EU said 70 entities are also subject to an asset freeze. It said Brussels is committed to finding a lasting and credible political solution to the Syrian conflict on the basis of UN resolution. The European Union has imposed sanctions on Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko and his son Viktor Lukashenko. In a statement, the bloc said 15 people are blacklisted in relation to the violent repression and intimidation of peaceful demonstrators. The sanction list also includes police chief of the Russian intelligence agency and Lukashenko's chief of staff. This brings the total number of Belarusians sanctioned by the European Union to 59. The sanctions freeze their assets in the European states and prevent them from obtaining visas to enter the bloc. The EU rejects Lukashenko's controversial re-election on 9th of August. Belarusian president denies all the allegations. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his country is very well prepared to move on without a post-Brexit trade deal, but Johnson added he believes a deal can be done if the European Union wants to do it. The Prime Minister said it all depends on the partners across the Channel. He said London can do very well on Australian terms without a deal. The UK's National Audit Office has warned of significant disruption when the Brexit transition period ends. The watchdog says it is very unlikely traders will be ready for checks the EU is due to impose at its borders. It says the UK ports have limited time to test new IT systems. Austria has shut down a mosque in Vienna in the wake of a shooting that left 4 people dead earlier this week. Integration Minister Suzanne Raab said the country's response to the attack is not a fight against Muslims. Interior Minister Karl Nehammer said the closure of the mosque is an important step against those who try to take advantage of the rule of law. Authorities have revealed new intelligence failings ahead of the attack, prompting the city's anti-terror chief to step aside. On Friday, Germany launched a series of raids over the attack, while 2 men were also arrested in Switzerland. And after years of delays, the first government-funded mosque in the Greek capital Athens has opened its doors to worshippers. Athens has not had a formal mosque since Ottomans left the region nearly 200 years ago.
Thousands of Muslims from countries including Pakistan, Syria, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh live in Athens. But until now, they had been forced to pray in makeshift mosques, in warehouses or basement apartment buildings. The Muslim community had been lobbying the government for decades, and it seems their prayers have finally been answered.
It's an historic moment for the Muslim communities living in Athens. We have been waiting this mosque for so long. Since the first law was passed in 2006, it took 14 years because there were so many bureaucratic barriers and some legal issues with the construction of the mosque.
The new building in Athens Vitanikos district will serve around 500,000 Muslims. Its construction had been riddled with controversy, including the change of locations due to protest by some locals. The construction finally began in 2017, and now after its completion, Muslims are breathing a sigh of relief.
The mosque for us Muslims is something very important, and I would like to thank Allah. I would like to thank the Republic of Greece, which helped us to complete this project.
Athens was the only European Union capital without an official mosque. Though some Muslims are unhappy with the mosque's appearance, as it lacks a dome or a minaret, others say it's a welcome start.
Actor Johnny Depp has announced his resignation from the Fantastic Beasts movie franchise. This comes after the actor lost a case against a tabloid that called him a wife-beater.
After being found guilty of libel by a British tabloid, Depp says Warner Bros. Studios has asked him to leave his role as villain Gellert Grindelwald. In a social media post, the actor said he has agreed to the request. Later, in a statement, Warner Bros. Said that the role of Grindelwald will be recast. The third film of the spin-off from the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling recently resumed production. The film is expected to arrive in movie theaters in 2022. Meanwhile, Depp says he plans to appeal the judgment against him in the London libel trial.
In football, Southampton comfortably beat Newcastle United 2-0 in a Premier League fixture. With the 5th league win this season, Southampton have topped the table with 16 points for the first time since 1988. The hosts secured a lead in the 7th minute with Che Adams volleying in after good work from Kyle Walker-Peters and Walcott. Stuart Armstrong capitalized on the Saints' lead by dispatching a left-foot shot into the bottom left corner. Newcastle carelessly lost the possession of the ball in dangerous positions for both goals, contributing to their defeat. Newcastle are in the 11th spot with 11 points. Another weather situation from around the world. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.